back to Wellbeing Wednesdays, brought to you by the Tulane University Counseling Center. I am one of your hosts, Shawna Foose, and I am a staff therapist at our center. I'm joined as always by my co-host.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jinaki, Flint, staff psychologist here at the Counseling Center, and we are joined by three lovely guests. I'll allow you to introduce yourselves.
My name is Dr. Katherin Herzoff. I'm a staff psychologist here at the Counseling Center.
Hi, my name is Dr. Terrebonne, and I'm also a staff psychologist here.
And I'm Dr. Elizabeth Wilson. I'm a postdoc fellow at the Counseling Center.
Awesome. Thank you so
Welcome.
much for joining us. Yeah, welcome. I think this is going to be such a useful topic for us to talk about today. So, Kat, I think you're going to go ahead and share your screen, and we'll get right into it. Let's go ahead.
Let me know if this is not showing up appropriately, but
Looking good.
yeah, so Taylor, Elizabeth, and I thought it may be timely to offer some considerations for effectively navigating interpersonal interactions during the holidays, because we're anticipating that likely the break is going to be stressful, especially during this year with the pandemic. It's an election year. There's been lots of tension in the country, so we thought it may be a helpful thing to kind of bring to the community. So one of the first tools that we wanted to share in navigating this landscape is a compass. And what I think of a compass in a psychological sense are values. So even though, especially in 2020, we may not have been able to achieve like specific goals that we had for this year, the values that underline those goals can still guide us in the direction that we want to head in. So I think one of the powers of values is that at any given moment, we can choose to be acting in line with them.
Kat, have you advanced your slide?
No, but I will.
Okay.
So to advance to the next slide, like one of the quotes, well, I hope I can advance it. Let's see. Yeah. One of the quotes that I like to share with students about values is that values and pain are two sides of the same coin. And the reason I like to share this quote is because it validates the pain that we often need to make space for if we're wanting to engage in meaningful activities. And so if we think about the holidays, a lot of us meaningful activities are spending time with others. And we can kind of think through the type of pain that actually may bring with it. So there are a couple of ways I like to think about this quote. One is that we can't move toward something we value without being willing to make some space for pain and discomfort. And so if we think, if each of us, maybe I'll pose it to, to the Zoom room, if each of us kind of thinks about the many relationships that we value, so maybe family or friends, think about the types of like emotional experiences those bring up. Are those only pleasant, I guess is maybe the question.
I would say for me personally, the relationships in my life are definitely the things that bring me the most joy or that I find the most meaning in. But I think with that, they can also be some of the relationships in which I experience the most frustration or disappointment because they have so much weight for me and I care about those people so deeply. So I think that's such a good point. They come with such great meaning and such great joy, but also I think have the capacity for the most hurt in them too.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone else can resonate with that. I certainly can.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So that's like an example of how values and pain are two sides of the same coin, right? Like the things that oftentimes bring us so much joy because we care so much about it can also bring us the most disappointment or the most grief, the most anxiety, frustration, and so on. And so if we're saying we're unwilling to experience any of that unpleasant stuff, like any of that grief, that frustration, that anxiety, all that we're doing is moving further and further away from the thing that we actually care about the most and that we value. So I think one of the things that may be helpful for us to remind ourselves of as we're heading into this holiday season is to expect some pain and discomfort. Because we will be spending time with, folks in whatever way. So again, the goals may be different here, like what exactly that looks like in 2020 may be different. But we're going to be spending time with people that we really care about, hopefully. And so it's kind of expected that there will be, you know, some unpleasant and painful emotions that may come up.
Yeah, just sort of keeping your expectations real, right? Being
Yep.
real with yourself, that in order to get the thing that you care about and treasure, you may have to tolerate some of that discomfort.
Exactly. I think another nice example is like giving this presentation for me, you know, is I'm engaging in something that's valuable. It's like giving back to the community, and holy moly, I'm really anxious, and that's not pleasant at all, right? So I think in a lot of ways, we really need to be willing to experience some discomfort if we're moving in a direction that we care about.
And it's important to note that anxiety and excitement both have the same physiology.
I know.
They feel the same in your body. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's another way of kind of reframing that maybe and pump yourself up. That is very true.
Yeah.
There's another way I like to think about this quote as well. So values and pain being two sides of the same coin. And that is that a lot of times we feel the most pain or regret if we act out of line with our values. And so in that way, I think the pain can serve as a signal that maybe something needs attention or maybe needs change. So I think another thing that may be helpful to be aware of as we kind of move into the holiday season is that when we're feeling emotional pain or discomfort, that may be an opportunity to kind of check in with ourselves. Are there some changes that need to happen? Are there, you know, do I need to kind of set some boundaries? Do I need to ask people to make changes or make requests? And both Taylor and Elizabeth will kind of go over in more detail about how we can effectively do that. Both of those ways of thinking about this quote, though, require that we know what we actually find meaningful, like what are our values. And so what I was hoping to do next is to guide us through an experiential exercise that will help us clarify what we value. And that differs from person to person, right? It's very, very individualistic. So there's a classic therapy technique for exploring values that involves imagining your 80th birthday. Sometimes they ask you to imagine like an end of life celebration as well, if you want to kind of intensify it. And there are many ways to do this exercise. And given our audience, I was thinking it may be helpful to think about your graduation. I guess I guide you through this to imagine your graduation. But if a graduation doesn't seem applicable to you, you can choose whatever event may seem more applicable. So this is an exercise about getting a sense for what you want to be in life and what you want to be about in life, what you would like to treat as important, and how you want to be with yourself and with others. And so if you're willing to give it a try, you can close your eyes and I'll guide you through just noticing different aspects of your experience. And I'll ask you some questions. You don't need to answer out loud unless you're watching this by yourself. Just notice what comes up for you. And there are no right or wrong answers in this exercise. It's all about noticing what comes up. Take a moment to get centered by noticing your breath and noticing how your body feels. And if you find yourself getting distracted or notice your mind wandering, that's okay. Just notice that and gently bring your attention back to this exercise. Now imagine moving forward through time. Imagine yourself changing as you move through college or through life. And imagine now that you're graduating. Your friends, family, and fellow students have gathered to celebrate your graduation. Imagine what you will look like on your graduation. And I invite you to imagine not who you think would likely be there, but imagine who you would most want to be at your graduation. There could even be people you haven't met yet. Try to really picture who would be there. And now the time has come in the party where people are starting to give speeches. They're taking turns, standing up and speaking about what you mean to them. They're speaking about what you stand for as a person and the impact you have. Again, I'm not asking you to imagine what they would likely say. I'm inviting you to imagine, if you were to be bold in this moment, what would you most want them to say? Deep down in your heart, imagine what you would most want others to say about what you mean. Imagine the first person standing up to speak. And imagine it's someone very close to you. And take a moment now and imagine what you would most want them to say about the impact you have. Try to really hear them saying that. And now imagine the next person standing up to speak. This could be someone from a different part of your life, perhaps a neighbor. And for them too, imagine what you would most want for them to say about what you stand for. And now thank your mind for this experience. And gently bring your attention back to the present moment. Take a moment to get centered here, noticing your breath and how your body feels. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So now I can't ask the audience right now what came up for them, or well, I can ask them, but I won't hear their answers. So I was thinking maybe I'll pose it to all of you. What came up for you?
Yeah, I think that I was definitely picturing my parents and my siblings, and they're saying they're proud of me and proud of compassion and dedication and love. So I think those are my values. I think a lot of people are going to value family members or people close to them that they consider family members.
Mm-hmm. So compassion, love. What was the other one you were saying?
Dedication.
Dedication. Yeah. Okay. So those kind of stood out as values, as things that were important to you.
Yeah.
I was imagining my children on my 80th birthday. And in addition to, I hope that they feel I've been loving and kind, and I really imagine them talking about like a lightness and a levity and fun, mm-hmm. Which was, I observed that very closely because it feels very heavy these days. Mm-hmm. And so it connected me back to, I think, a value that I hold around lightness that's hard for me to make contact with right now with so much happening.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's kind of a nice thing to get in touch with again as we enter maybe you know, this period where we're spending more time with family as well.
Right.
Taylor, Jinaki, you willing to share?
Yes. I went to graduation and I went back and forth because I was just like, okay, this is still what I noticed was what happened at my graduation from graduate school was what I want to happen at my 80th birthday. So, but words for me came up in terms of altruism. Like I felt that entire communities would come together and talk about being able to be connected and create safety and in this world, and they would just have many different people. It would be like the multicultural bonanza of folks that would come together and speak about my values of altruism, diversity, or multiculturalism, and talk about the work, the relentless, unwavering work or push that and how I cultivated courage as a value, because courage is a value to me. Is not the absence of fear, but dragging fear along with me into the world. And so I imagine that that would be like the speeches around like my core values is about bringing people together and making those connections. And my daughter showed up prominently in that because, you know, she sacrificed a great deal so that mother could be in graduate school. And so she was the first person who took the mic in my mind. So yeah, so great exercise. This is great.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
I think it stood out to me, Shawna, how you said fun, because that was one that came up for me too, like a livelihood, like a spirit about life or existing. And I think that really stood out to me in the sense of like there weren't particular things or events that came to mind that were fun. It was more like a spirit or a way of being. And I thought that was really cool, like the sense of like carrying that with us regardless of circumstance. And I think I found myself thinking a lot about how despite circumstances that we're in, like the traits of who we are, what we value, are things we can carry with us. And I think that also brought up this sense of like grit, like being able to survive through things or carry a spirit or a strength with us, even in times that are really challenging or painful. And so I think those were two that really stood out to me, like almost just like this wherewithal, like a grit that survives different situations or circumstances.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, Taylor, kind of, you know, piggybacking off of what you're saying, is like values can really center us. And even though, you know, things around us may change and may be very, very stormy, right, they can really be this kind of, this anchor that we can use to center us and ground us, and then be able to kind of pivot to whatever the situation demands. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all so much for sharing that. It was hard for me to do it while I was guiding you through it, but a lot of times authenticity comes up for me as something, or non-judgmentalness. People feel comfortable being around me. I think when I do these values exploration exercises, the students, they often comment that they value so many different things. Like that is one thing that they're noticing. And so I think what happens a lot when we value lots of different things, which we all do, is that inevitably at some point, some of those values may, you know, be in conflict with one another. And so we may, at least temporarily, have to prioritize one over the other. And we wanted to move to next is some strategies for effectively doing that. And Taylor will take us to the next section here.
I think one of the biggest ways for kind of balancing some of that, or holding those conflicting values or conflicting wants or needs, is thinking about boundaries and how important those can be, setting those in our relationships or even within ourselves. think they're in that way kind of a big piece of our own personal health, but especially in our relationships, they can be used to maintain health of other people. And then the health of the relationship itself, kind of like this third entity. I always think of relationships as being both people in it, but then the relationship kind of having its own life and entity too. And so thinking about boundaries as a tool to kind of honor the wants and the needs of ourselves, of the other person, and of the relationship in a way that allows us to kind of mutually support what we want or need for ourselves, for the other, in a way that allows us to kind of better communicate that as well. And so one of the things I think comes up a lot, I imagine, especially in our interpersonal relationships and over holidays, is how to kind of manage what we want or need or express that to other people. I think a lot of times when there's closeness or high emotions, it can be hard for us to really say what we need from other people. And that can be for a number of different reasons. But I think one of the things that can be helpful is kind of setting a frame for how we can maybe effectively say or share where we're at or what we need in our relationships. And I think that starts with kind of identifying, like, what are the boundaries that we'd like to see in our relationships? Like, what do we feel like we need in our relationships from ourselves, from others, in order to have health or have what we need? And then kind of consciously giving ourselves permission to communicate that to other people. I think a lot of times in our relationships, we may have the sense of like, well, to keep the other person happy or to maintain the relationship, there might be this tendency to maybe quell what we want or need, or if we've said what we wanted or needed before and it hasn't been honored, it may make us hesitant to do so again. But kind of being intentional about giving ourselves permission to say what we want or need or communicate that to other people in a way that hopefully will help them to hear us and to honor what we are wanting or needing. So I think one tool that comes to mind for me when I think about that is setting boundaries using something called an I message. I think the reason for that is a lot of times if we come at someone like, you need to do this because of this, well, they're probably not going to really hear us very well. But if we can kind of frame it in a lens of what we are wanting or needing, because the person cares for us and generally wants to have a good relationship with us, ideally, I think that allows the frame for kind of better hearing us. And so kind of a format I kind of bear in mind is like thinking about structuring it as the behavior, so what you're observing, how you feel about it, and then what the outcome or the consequence of that is. So thinking about like, when you do behavior, I feel this because of whatever consequence comes. So I'm thinking of like, for example, when you interrupt me, I feel frustrated because I lose my train of thought. So it identifies maybe what the behavior is, what it brings up for you, and then also why it's problematic or why it's challenging or difficult. And it can be a range of things, but kind of structuring it in that way, I think allows for people to maybe better hear where we're at and what we need. But I also think it's important to know that the way that we communicate with people may change depending upon the relationship. There are different levels of safety that we have in relationships. There's different levels of openness that we have. It may be that this kind of conversation can be had with someone who we get the sense is safe, that deeply values us, that we deeply value. That may not be the case in all of our relationships, especially if the power balance is different. And I think it certainly requires us to be thoughtful and intentional about considering, what is my goal for this relationship? What's kind of the nature of this relationship? And using that as a guide to kind of vary how we're interacting, because it may be in some of our relationships, our goal is to just make it through without a huge argument. And if that's our goal, that might really change the way that we're communicating or the boundaries that we're setting with someone compared to a relationship where there's a deeper sense of safety or closeness. So I think there's definitely some thoughtfulness or intentionality that has to come with that too. I'm also thinking a little bit about how, given that, I think especially in difficult relationships, it can be important for us to kind of remember what our rights are as people. And I think a lot of times, especially in relationships where our rights may be violated at times, or in relationships where maybe we haven't felt that we're able to own that, it can be important to keep in mind different things that are inherently rights that we have as people, like these personal rights. And so I kind of wanted to walk through some of those. And I wanted to read them out loud just because I think sometimes it can be meaningful or helpful to just hear it. So I have the right to say no or ask for what I want. I have the right to feel and express my emotions. I have the right to my own opinions, values, and standards. I have the right to expect honesty from others. I have the right to ask for emotional support or help. I have the right not to have to justify myself. I have the right not to take responsibility for others' behaviors, or their thoughts or feelings. I have the right to ask for personal space. I have the right to choose not to respond to a situation. I have the right to protest unfair treatment. I have the right to be in a non-abusive environment. I have the right to be treated with dignity and respect. I have the right to negotiate for change. I have the right to be angry at someone I love. I have the right to say, I don't know. I have the right to change my mind or choose a different course of action. I have the right to not anticipate other people's needs. And thinking of these rights kind of as a guide for ourselves. You know, I think these can be something that can be meaningful to consider when we're thinking about not just what we value, but also how we interact with other people. And I think some of these are easier to keep in mind than others, and certainly depending upon the relationship, can be easier to exercise or kind of hold. I guess it's making me think about, you know, for the Zoom room, for you guys hearing these rights, like, are there some that stand out to y'all, or maybe ones that feel easier to hold or bear in mind than others?
Yes, the right not to justify myself, really, I felt that in my body, like right here. Like, and I even had to take a breath. I was like I just had to take it in, right? The list of these lists of rights have gotten me through a lot. I used to tape the sheet onto like next to my computer at one point in my life. So yes, when I heard that one in particular, it just hit me, like, you know, and I just like took a breath into it. Thank you for reading them, though. It is much different hearing it, right? You kind of get a different power to it, a different way of taking it in when you read that. So that was a good, thank you for doing that choice of actually reading each one out loud. That one certainly resonated with me too. There were a few of them, but that one in particular.
I was really struck by the one about I have a right to take personal space, I think it said on the other slide. And it really depends on each individual situation, but if you are returning home to a crowded house in the age of quarantine, it can feel like you can't really get that space, or you shouldn't, because it's family time or the holidays, and to remember that you actually can do that, should do that, take some private, personal, quiet space for yourself. That one really struck me.
I think there's so many of these, and hearing them, saying them, reading them, that I operate on this kind of unconscious level for me. Like, I don't even think about the fact that these are things that I can own or experience. And I think sometimes don't even think about the ways in which I'm not acting in accordance with these rights, or maybe feel pressure to do the opposite. And I think that can be in one-on-one relationships. It can be pressure I put on myself. It can be at a societal level. I think, you know, especially given like the different identities that we all experience, I think that comes in different ways too. I think there's just so much that we hold. And I think that it makes it really challenging to own these rights at times, especially if we're in families or in societies that act as though those rights aren't inherent to us.
True.
Thank you.
I also love that the previous slide before you got to the rights, you talked about being able to identify when you need to have that conversation of behavior and feeling and result. Because that's true. I have a right to choose what battle to pick.
Absolutely. Yeah, and thinking about, is this worth it for me? Like, what is my goal here? And what is my safety here too?
Yes.
Bearing in mind those rights, if we know those rights are going to be continually violated, how does that change the willingness we have to have these conversations?
Yeah.
I think one that's going to be especially important during the holiday with students going home is the right to say no or ask for what you want, which is a skill that I'm going to talk about next, the Deerman skill. And this is from the interpersonal effectiveness module from dialectical behavior therapy. I don't know if y'all are familiar. It's all about asserting your needs or trying to get someone to do what you want or saying no to a request. And I was gonna use an example that I think a lot of people are gonna experience, which is maybe you go home and your family member brings up politics at the dinner table. So walking through these Deerman skills, they're describe, express, assert, reinforce or reward, being mindful, appearing confident, and then negotiating. So with the example, so a family member at the dinner table brings up politics and wants to engage you in a conversation about that, and you're not comfortable. So you want to say no to that. You're going to describe what happens. So I hear what you're saying about the election. And then you want to express your feelings using those I statements that Taylor was talking about. So saying, I'm not comfortable speaking about this right now. I don't feel comfortable. And then kind of saying, I would prefer not to talk about this while we're enjoying Thanksgiving at the dinner table. And that's asserting your needs and saying no directly. Because remembering that they can't read your mind, and if you're not direct, they're not gonna get it. And then you want to reinforce or reward the person ahead of time. So expressing appreciation, letting them know how granting your request or respecting your no is going to help them out or help this relationship out or this interaction. So I'm interested in hearing your opinions. I appreciate you wanting to hear mine. Right now, I think it would be great to hear about how you've been doing since we last saw each other, and we can have a conversation about politics this evening after we're done with dinner. Does that sound good to you? So you're appearing confident, maintaining eye contact, using an assertive tone of voice, being mindful. So when you're having this conversation, returning to your goal, saying no again and again, and then negotiating. So you're saying, I don't want to have this conversation right now. I feel uncomfortable, and offering to have this conversation later when you feel more comfortable. So not at the dinner table at Thanksgiving. I'd like to hear y'all's thoughts or other ways that you would navigate politics at the Thanksgiving dinner, because I think that might be something that comes up for a lot of students.
Well, I mean, I know in my family, we just sort of have rules at the dinner table always around not talking around about politics. So that's sort of agreed upon in advance. If it comes up, it's pretty easy, I think, to just remind, right? To sort of say, hey, it's dinner time. We can have that conversation, and I would love to hear where you're going with this, but let's postpone it until we finish dinner.
Yeah, I like that idea of setting rules before.
Yeah. Setting
the expectation before.
Yeah. And I think kind of aligning with everyone to say, like, we all want to have some quality time together at the table, right? Like, we're all in agreement that we want this to be an enjoyable, pleasant meal together. And so let's just remember some of our ground rules,
Yeah, and we want to maintain these relationships.
This is what's important to us. This is what we value.
Exactly.
I think this reminds me of the right to personal space, and like, I guess a metaphorical personal space of like, you know, right now in my mind, I want to take some personal space or take some space for, you know, enjoying the dinner. So I thought that was a nice kind of way of, for me at least, to remind myself of, yes, I do have that right to ask to have a, you know, conversation about something at a later time, and ask someone to respect that boundary. So I appreciated that example.
I think this is also interesting, especially the example of talking about politics, because that also could possibly be, there could be some cultural nuances to that, because at my dinner table, that's all we're talking about. It's not all, but it certainly comes up, and there is not a sense that people are uncomfortable talking about it. Because it's kind of a way that we bond and that we strategize and that we make commitments to each other to do better and be better. People get more interested in community. So we literally will sit around the table and talk about the things that maybe we can do and we should be doing, and how we can start those things off. So we literally have created whole like community initiatives at the holiday dinner table, you know, and have implemented them. So the politics is very personal for many BIPOC people. And so that would get at the table, and anyone who doesn't agree with doing work in the community, there's kind of this unspoken, like, you're going to either sit at the kids' table or go watch TV, yeah. Or you're just going to contribute what you can to the conversation, right? So that person would probably be the one saying, oh, you know, I feel like, you know, but no one does that, because there's the unspoken rule that is something that we do to kind of actually help to better ourselves and to heal too, because sometimes we end up in situations that are very wounding. And so it's a time for us to kind of talk to each other about it and do those things. So I think that those cultural nuances can kind of shift around that particular thing. But there are things that people, you know, I can think of that I would say, you know, I prefer we not talk about this while I'm eating.
Right.
Because it makes my gut feel anxious, and I can't properly digest my food. Right? So yeah, so then there's that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jinaki, that you're highlighting, you know, in some families, talking about politics is a way to come together and really align, and in others, it's a source of conflict. So it really does depend on all those intersections of your cultural background, your family dynamics, all of those things. I think that is an important piece to bear in mind.
Yeah, and shared values with different families, right? So yeah, for Jinaki, that's a shared value in your family, and then in some families it's like everyone's got their different opinions around that. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I was thinking there may be a creative way of doing the birthday exercise and affect, you know, to get at family values, right? That may be a nice exercise too. Like, what do we as a family unit value?
Ooh,
and what's important to us? Yeah, I know. Maybe someone can come up with the exercise for that.
That's a good one.
That'll be another episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Yeah, I don't know how we're doing on time, and or if there were more thoughts or like things that you're anticipating, Shawna and Jinaki, in terms of navigating interpersonal interactions during the holidays.
Is that all you have for slides for us?
That is all we, oh yeah, yes, that is all we have for slides.
Okay, let's go ahead and have you stop your screen share there, Kat. Perfect, wonderful. And yeah, let's kind of open this up for discussion about other ways we can think about managing these relationships over the break during the holidays.
Anyone?
Well, I'll, for me, I know one thing that is kind of critical, I think, to my ability to stay mindful and kind of hold my own space and hold space for others is to really take good care of myself. And so kind of prioritizing, you know, my own mindfulness practices, my own fitness, my nutrition, my attention to nutrition, things that I know will kind of keep my body strong, my mind clear, so that when I'm in maybe a tense moment, I have all the resources internally that I might need to navigate through that tense moment and that discomfort.
That goes to what Taylor was saying about the health of your body and the health of others' bodies, right? Being able to pay attention to that, being able to really rock that. Because when we're anxious or we feel upset or angry or hyper aroused, you know, it can feel like the body's not supporting you and that you don't get to use your body as a resource then in that process to heal yourself, create a container, or actually help others to feel safe and attuned with you. So those social engagement, you know, pieces get really tested during those times. Right. So it is important to make sure that you kind of have some fortification. And even then, you know, the body will respond how it responds, because you can be fit as a fiddle. If you get triggered, your body's going to respond. Yeah. You know, yeah. Now it's just that helps with you to manage that. Right. So you get to, you know, actually be able to manage what is happening and identify what is happening. Like, oh, that set me off. Oh, okay. So how then do I kind of restore the body back to a sense of peace and calm so that we can stay attuned?
I think something that for me that I've been trying to kind of cope ahead for as I'm reflecting on this is even like asking for interaction. So I am an immigrant, and I've been an international student throughout my my post-secondary education. And so a lot of times around the holidays, even if they're not holidays that I personally grew up celebrating, that can bring up a lot of loneliness and kind of needing to be mindful and kind of cope ahead for how I'm going to spend that time that a lot of other people around me are going to spend with their families, and I'm far away and maybe am unable to be close physically with my family. And Zoom has been a great, you know, kind of way of bridging geographical divides. So, but I think like for me to think ahead and cope ahead, like I am likely going to be lonely around this time. So can I schedule a way to check in with family who are not going to be celebrating Thanksgiving because it's not a holiday that we celebrate in my country of origin. So I think that is something that I need to kind of, you know, be mindful of for myself and ask, right? Like using the Deerman skill, ask for this thing that I know is going to help me feel more connected.
You're welcome to come get a plate from me, Kat.
Thank you.
I love this idea of cope ahead. I love this, that, you know, so much of what we might experience is predictable. And so, you know, you can reflect on past experience, look toward this experience and prepare a little bit. Yeah, you don't have to have like a whole schedule, but put some things in place for yourself. I know in the students I've been talking with too, who are going home and won't be really have anywhere to go or anything to do but stay home. I've been talking with them about, well, what can you plan for? So that there are some, you know, highlights, there's some things to kind of mark your experience and give you things to look forward to.
Yeah, so important.
Yeah. I just want to thank you guys. This has been really great, very concise, very good information for coping ahead, right? Yeah. And I just pray that students really listen to this. And I know that if they do, they're going to get a lot of useful information to take with them. I think it's powerful and strong that you showed up in this way to help students kind of gather themselves for the holidays, because it can be daunting and there's a lot of anxiety around it. And thank you for just coming on and agreeing to do this today and bringing such wonderful information. I sincerely appreciate that.
Yes, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. I'm
Thank you
sharing
for
my
having me.
screen very quickly to let folks know how to find all 5 of us at the Counseling Center. One phone call to 504-314-2277. You get the opportunity to speak with the 2 lovely ladies there on the slide, Belinda or Charles Zetta. And they will be able to schedule you in most cases for a same-day appointment to speak to someone on our staff and hear about, resources and recommendations we might have and make a plan from there. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're doing everything over Zoom so that we can all stay safe and not have to wear masks. Don't forget to follow Tulane Campus Health on social media. Watch for these episodes on IGTV and on our YouTube channel. And as always, a little bit of levity as we wrap this up.
Perfect.
Nice.
Perfect.
There's
That will
always
be me.
and me. There's always pie. No, truly, this has been, I think, so valuable, and I'm so glad that you were able to join
For
us. This
sure.
is our final episode for this semester.
Yay.
Yay! So I think it's a really great way to round things out, and we're so happy to have you with us. So
Yes.
with that, we will
Yes.
say
And
farewell.
thank you, Shawna. Is in this final episode, I want to take a moment to just give a special shout out to you. Shawna is also, she's the co-host of this show, just so the public knows, but she's also the producer of this show. So what you see is because of Shawna's work. She makes sure this gets edited and captioned well, and she shows up every week to really and to co-host this show with me. And so I just want to say, in the spirit of relationship building, Shawna, you have been my sister. You have helped me a lot through this semester. This show being particularly one of them, I am so grateful and that we have you as a producer. And so I just wanted to just take this minute to just thank you and to give you your props.
Thanks, Jinaki. Right back at ya. I have to give one additional shout out. There is a student who helps me with captioning. Their name is Wash Fields. Through the Goldman Center support and with Wash, we've been able to make sure all of our episodes are accessible. And so really, really grateful for that.
Awesome.
I couldn't do it. Couldn't do it all on my own. Absolutely.
Yes.
Take the village.
Yes. And the wonderful staff at the Counseling Center who have given their time freely to create these presentations, to show up here every week, that have made this happen. We are just so grateful. And I just want to take, since this is our last one, I want this to be on record as us really coming together as a family. We lost our director. We also lost another really long-term staff member this year. And I want to say Taylor, Elizabeth, and Kat, these are all newbies, right? But they have just come into this family and just really built it and made it stronger and wonderful. And we're grateful for that. So all of the things that we're grateful for is how we've come together as a family, how we've gelled as a family, and the people that are coming in have just acted as though this has always been family. And so we are really grateful for that, and that you have agreed to also come through with this last episode. It was such great information. So thank you to the staff of the Counseling Center, our leadership team, Matthew Sebeski, Lindsay Suddeth, and Donna Bender, even though she's gone. We miss you. And all the people who made this happen, Dr. Chavez, all of you guys who have made this happen. Thank you to the staff at the Well, Student Health, who also came in and agreed to be guests with us as well, guests and co-hosts with us. So I know I'm reading a laundry list of folks, but it is important to shout out the people who have made this happen. And so we just give thanks. And finally, just another thanks to Shawna for the production. This has been really great. And I'm looking forward to even more dynamics and hijinks and kicks in 2021.
Indeed. It's my privilege to get to do this every week with you and with our guests every week. So with that, we're going to go ahead and wish all of our audience a very happy new year. And we will be back with Wellbeing Wednesdays in January with returning guests and new content. So make sure to follow us on social media so you can tune in and not miss an episode. And with that, we will say, be well.
Well, bye.